Heinlein. I'm the Director of Debate here at the University of North Texas. It is my pleasure to welcome you to a public debate here at the University of North Texas as our penultimate event for Comm Day 2026, y'all! Let me tell you, we've been here doing a number of different things. We've had panels, we've had poster sessions, we've had some debates, we've had a whole bunch of different things. I want to personally thank everybody for coming out to Comm Day. Hasn't it been a great day so far? Yeah! We have done so many Comm things. Oh, it's wonderful. We are Comm-tastic, y'all. Really rolling it. I'm going to introduce our players for the debate this evening and then let them take over the things that they are going to do. We are extremely excited to welcome our guests from the University of Texas at Dallas, the Comm Speech and Debate team. Yeah! They'll be representing the affirmative on the debate this evening, and we will hear from Charles Yelderman and Tyler Crivella here. I just want to thank them because I know they just came hot off of the NFA Nationals tournament in Nashville, getting in just a couple of days ago. So really appreciate you coming in to join us for this, where Tyler was in the tied for 5th place in the quarterfinals for extent finals there. So they will face off against the team from the University of North Texas over here. Yeah! We will be representing the negative on this side of the topic, and we will hear from Jack Hasper and Freddie Smith, who recently at IPDA Nationals, as a team, were in the quarterfinals of the national tournament. Yeah! So we are super excited to present a debate for you on the question of the state of Texas should legalize recreational marijuana for adults aged 21 and over, a topic that has had much discussion on it in the last several months, including a discussion over the summer between when we saw Governor Abbott square off against Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. We've seen a special session in October going through the things. And just yesterday, or last night, I guess, Donald Trump, from an executive order, changed the classification of marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug for medicinal research. So a very timely topic for things for us to discuss. And we're very excited to hear from our debaters. Without any more ado, I'm going to turn it over to the affirmative. Who's our first affirmative speaker? Welcome into the podium, please. You are good.
All right, firstly, I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming out. Happy belated 420, given that we're going to be talking about marijuana the whole time, so that's really fun. Of course, we're debating the resolution: the state of Texas should legalize recreational use of marijuana for adults aged 21 and older. First, we're going to establish a quick framework. We're going to be basing this round based on who can prove net benefit, which essentially means who can prove that more often than not that either the recreational legalization of marijuana provides more benefit or less benefit to society than the status quo. And in order to do that, first we have to establish a couple of definitions for today's round. First, we're going to define the word recreational. According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, that means simply done for enjoyment. And then secondly, we're going to be defining the word marijuana, which is defined as the psychoactive dried resinous flower buds and leaves of the female hemp or cannabis plant that contain high levels of THC and are smoked, vaped, ingested, especially for their intoxicating effect. That being said, we're now going to move into our first point, which talks about economic growth. And we're going to move into our first sub-point here, which speaks on the legalization of marijuana having already proven itself to positively impact the economy of multiple other states within the US, including Colorado and California. Evidence piece 1 from the California State Department of Tax and Fee Administration on June 3rd of 2024 states that since January of 2018, total cannabis tax revenue is more than $6 billion, including nearly $3.1 billion in cannabis excess tax and nearly $2.4 billion in sales tax. Further, our subpoint B states that there is a certain sense of urgency behind this legislation, given that surrounding states to Texas have begun to legalize marijuana. There is a strong chance that the state of Texas may begin to lose out on jobs to surrounding states should it wait any longer. This is supported by an article posted by the Marijuana Policy Project, which states that an economic report prepared by the RAND Corporation explains that the advantage of being a first mover state is that with no competition, states that legalize adult use sales tax may see enormous demand, which can be a great opportunity for generating a tax windfall. 12% of Americans report consuming marijuana in the past year, and many consider cannabis legal status when considering where to travel. The longer a state waits, the more jobs and revenue it will lose to other states. Moving on to our third piece of evidence, we have an article from the Cato Institute on August 30th of 2023, which states that among the first states to adopt recreational marijuana laws, California, Colorado, and Oregon saw boosts in agricultural work. There also is evidence that recreational marijuana law adoption is associated with modest employment gains for Hispanics and people older than 30. We conclude that legalization of recreational marijuana has few adverse labor market effects for most working age individuals and may actually generate some small benefits for some. Further, we're going to move into now criminal justice reform. Our first subpoint for this being that modern day marijuana legalization allows for significant amount of racial injustice within our communities. According to Law Review at the University of Chicago, despite black and white people using drugs at similar rates, a 2010 study found that black people are arrested at a rate of 3.73 to 1 compared to whites. This disparity is likely even more pronounced due to the lack of federal data on Latinx people. When tested in New York, one of 2 states which actually has Latinx arrest data available, a similar disparity of nearly 4 to 1 was found. Further, we can move on to now seeing how the illegalization of marijuana has been rooted in our history. According to the Law Review at the University of Chicago, the war on drugs began with the explicit notion that black people were a quote-unquote enemy. It was a political strategy designed to disenfranchise black people under the pretense of protecting the public. Thank you. I'm open for cross.
Do y'all want to stand since we're doing open
Y'all
or
gonna
sit?
stand?
Yeah,
There's a lot of people trying to see y'all. I think we should stand.
Yeah, I'm good. Got it. Y'all good?
Yes.
Okay, you state that racism and arrests is rooted in our history. How does the affirmative change the history?
The history isn't something that we can necessarily change, but the modern day is something that we definitely can change.
Got it. So my next question would then be, if you aren't changing the structural problem of racism, then what is stopping cops from going to a different route of over-oppressing marginalized people?
Well, once again, the issue that we're trying to attack right now is the fact that marijuana law, as it was implemented, was intended to be attacking persons of color, meaning that the law in and of itself is the issue, not necessarily the cops, although, yes, that certainly could be another issue that you could mention.
Under your point about the economy, you talk about revenue being lost by not taxing marijuana in Texas. Do you have any information on how much revenue we're losing as a state?
So the numbers aren't out because we obviously don't know what would happen if we suddenly increased or legalized weed, because people aren't growing weed in Texas right now. But we know that THC jobs, when they were called into question before the special session last year, there were about 50,000 of them put in jeopardy. That was from the Reason Foundation, which provided a report to the special session.
Yeah, I guess my next question is, you stated how first mover states see a bunch of benefits to their economy. Isn't it already too late?
Even at best, this is a defensive argument. This is not saying that we will lose money if we legalize marijuana. There will still be some amount that we will gain, and so even if you don't want to buy our first mover advantage,
wait,
there's
that's
still
just
a net
talking
benefit.
about if my question was offensive or defensive. Could you answer the question?
Okay, other states nearby may have legalized weed, and that means that some regions of Texas won't benefit from this. But for example, along our eastern border, there's still a lot of growth to be had there because we haven't seen a lot of legalization east of us.
Got it.
Okay. Jack, ready?
Good when you were.
Everybody ready? Am I ready? Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start that 5 minutes. Now, first off, I want to thank everybody so much for being here, especially our UT Dallas team for coming all the way out to UNT. Thank you so much for debating us, and thank you to our wonderful audience for being here. I'm Freddie, this is Jack, we're representing the University of North Texas, and we are proud to negate today's resolution. We will agree to the framework and the definitions that the AF has lined out, and now I'm going to walk you through our 3 negative contentions, and then Jack will respond to the AF case when it's his turn. So, let's start with our first contention of public safety, because there are more important things than money. When you legalize something, you are directly making it more available to the consumer. More people are going to be using this. We know because Columbia University in 2023 studied young adults in states where marijuana has been legalized, and they found an increase in overall use, frequent use, and cannabis use disorder. If we legalize, more people will be using it. And so we should hope that the thing that we're legalizing, that we're giving to more people, is actually safe, but the problem is it's not. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they reported in January 2024 that marijuana impairment is associated with increased car crash risk. Inside the source, they point out that 40% of all fatal car crashes that year, the driver was impaired with marijuana. That is almost half of the time. According to the same source, that year there were 39,345 crash fatalities in the United States. So doing some math, and please check my work, I am a comm major, but I think that 40% of that amounts to 15,738 preventable deaths if it were not for marijuana being a part of the equation. Legalization leads to more use, and more use leads to more deaths. And not just that, but there are also significant harms to youths under legalization. A study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2022 looked at states that legalized recreational marijuana. They found increases in adolescent cannabis exposure and cannabis-related health incidents. So, in the resolution, even though it says 21 plus, legalization changes social perception and increases access. I'm not going to ask y'all for a show of hands, but I imagine not everyone in this room waited until they were 21 to have a beer for the first time. That's what comes naturally. When something becomes legal, it feels safer, especially to vulnerable younger populations. If legalization creates preventable risk, particularly impaired driving and youth exposure, that alone is a reason to proceed cautiously. But that caution is already necessary in the status quo. If we go with the AF world, we'd be looking at a different and even more dangerous situation. Research from the National Academies for Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine last December explained that when cannabis becomes legalized, producers compete primarily through product strength, which means that legalization leads to producers being forced to produce more and more potent drugs to compete with other producers. This creates a potency race, and here's why that matters. People already smoke marijuana illegally, but historically, illegal cannabis has had lower THC levels. Legalization isn't just increasing use, it is increasing the intensity of impairment by increasing the intensity of the marijuana that is available. A 2022 peer-reviewed study in The Lancet finds higher potency cannabis is associated with greater cognitive impairment, greater dependency risk, and greater mental health harms. So, in terms of what the AF world does, not only are more people now doing this dangerous drug, but it is also going to be even more dangerous. Our second contention is corporatization and the destruction of small farms. On the negative, we are pro-farmers, but the AF is actively propping up corporations that will crush local farms. The AF talks a lot about how much money the plan is going to make, but they do not tell you who that money is going to be going to. It is not going to be going towards small farms, it's going to be going towards destroying them. This is a problem regardless of your own personal opinions on marijuana. If you like marijuana, you probably don't want to see it corporatized and see small farmers put out of business. If you don't like marijuana, you don't want it to be going to factory farms who are able to make it mass marketable. This is a situation where no one wins. Research from the Brookings Institute in 2022 explains that cannabis markets rapidly consolidate because regulatory compliance, licensing fees, and startup costs favor large, well-funded companies. What this means is that in the world of the AF, people who are farming products ethically, locally, and sustainably are going to get shut out of business. And don't just take our word for it, it's already happened in California. When they legalized weed, they have found that wholesale prices collapsed, pushing many small growers out of the business. That's not reform, that's commercialization. Which leads us to our third contention, which is actually going to be a counterplan. We can solve for the harms outlined in the AF and the NEG better than the AF can under legalization. Our counterplan is going to be decriminalization, reform in how we handle marijuana. Under decriminalization, possession would not result in jail time or a criminal record. That addresses the concerns about over-incarceration and disproportionate enforcement. The American Civil Liberties Union reported in 2020 that marijuana reform policies significantly reduced arrests and criminal justice harms in jurisdictions that changed their enforcement policies. So we solved for the incarceration issue in the NEG case. At the same time, the National Bureau of Economic Research in 2021 found that decriminalization reduces criminal penalties while avoiding the larger consumption increases often associated with full recreational markets. That's key. Legalization just changes supply and builds an industry, but decriminalization is changing the punishments. We're getting all of the benefits, which is how we agree we weigh this case, but none of the harms. If we can reduce arrests without building a corporate drug market, without increasing use, and without incurring more public health harms, that's the responsible policy, and that's why at the end of the round you're voting for North Texas. Thank you.
All right, ready?
Yes.
So let's talk about decriminalization. I guess I'm not quite sure. Why would large farmers not just do all of your second advantage in a decriminalized world?
Because in a decriminalized world, we are not legalizing marijuana. We are not pushing it mass market. But what changes is that it does not go on your criminal record and you do not face criminal penalties if you are found in possession of it. So it solves for the incarceration issue without creating a larger market of marijuana.
If you're a farmer and there's no penalties to growing weed, why wouldn't you just grow weed then?
Wait, that point is not talking about farmers being the problem. What we are talking about is that in the affirmative world, what happens is corporations buy up farmland and start to produce marijuana because they know that they can now sell it, which means that small farmers get crushed, which is bad for the environment.
Okay, we can go ahead and move on to this National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration point that you made about increased car crash risk.
Yes.
Is there any evidence, like empirical evidence, on whether or not this is legally sold marijuana or street marijuana?
We would articulate it doesn't really matter if it's legally sold or like illegally sold, because the affirmative world makes the weed more potent overall, which means that in both scenarios it's going to lead to more car crashes.
Adding on to that, it's not just making it more potent, but making it more widely available. We're not legalizing in the neg world, so we're not trying to get more marijuana out to more people.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. From public safety right now, what is the leading cause of people dying in car crashes?
We don't know that, but what our source has articulated is that in 40% of fatal car crash incidents, they are impaired with marijuana.
From where?
That's from
The
the
National
National Highway Traffic
Okay,
Safety
but like,
Administration.
that's from one county.
Wait, no, that's
that's
from
the
the
national.
US.
Okay, isn't weed illegal in most of the US? Okay, we'll just... All right.
Good one, you are.
Hey y'all, I'm Tyler from UT Dallas. Very thankful to be here. Let's first provide some refutation on what you just heard from the negative, and then provide you some new arguments why you should still be voting for a world in which we have recreational marijuana. First, they talk about how public safety is really bad because when people have access to weed, then they move in cars and sometimes they crash. This is a bad argument that you should not be considering on its face because of a few main reasons. We've seen in the past that a lot of things cause car crashes. For example, phones and also alcohol. This does not mean that we should fully ban these sorts of devices, rather that we should make sure that individuals have safe and efficient usage under them. In a world in which you have decriminalized weed, or a world in which you have no weed allowed in any world, what you're going to see is people won't know how to use these products in a safe manner. The difference, though, is when you legalize these products, is that it allows nonprofit organizations to provide educational materials and provide actually more efficient ways to understand what it means to use weed in any context. This is the same thing that we've seen with things like sex ed in the past, where when individuals are told abstinence or no use at all is the only option, they end up using things in a far worse manner. The same applies to weed. Legalizing it and allowing individuals to understand it more is how you prevent people from dying from them. Second, on corporatization, this is a super minute issue. In fact, at the special session last year, we saw that a conservative think tank, which was writing for weed legalization, found that in the US, or that in Texas alone, 0.00001% of the 12.5 million acres right now are used for this sort of production of THC. That is not something that will substantially increase, and is probably not enough for you to see that the entire economy is going to fall apart. Even if you think that corporatization is bad, it still means there will be more jobs because there's more products to sell in Texas specifically. That is still something that benefits our economy, even if it's just for big businesses. Lastly, on their decriminalization counterplan, the only substantive difference between our two worlds is the amount of use that is happening and the amount of stigma around marijuana. In a world of decriminalization, as they've said, less people use these products. That still means, though, that there's a stigma against marijuana and that there is still going to be bad effects associated with using marijuana. Individuals in large interstate or international think tanks will not feel inclined to do research about these products because they still will have the problems that are existing in a decriminalized world. It may not have a criminal penalty, but they're still going to be considered breaking the law by some civil suits. Some nations have gone through this, and it isn't a way to solve things better. A new argument that you should consider is that legalization, though, helps prevent black market deaths. Right now, people are dying from black market usage of marijuana. The Journal of Economic and Behaviors Organization noted last year that in Texas alone, 7,000 people have died from marijuana that has been laced with things like fentanyl or other illicit products that only appear on the black market. This is something that will continue to happen in the negative world because it is only through a pure legalization that you actually encourage individuals to go through the federal systems of checking things and the FDA's process that cannot allow there to be any instances in which individuals see that they are having any form of recoil. In a world of decriminalization, black market deaths will still happen and any form of bad usage will still occur. And furthermore, this is something that actively turns a lot of the arguments that they are making, because it means that in a world in which you are voting for the negative, you are still going to see things such as violence, marijuana laced with things of illicit substances such as fentanyl, or other sorts of products like ketamine, all still be interacting with marijuana. These are bad things. We should not let people have access to them. Putting them up in a store like Walmart is going to make people more aware of them, more likely to research them, and more able to become informed as what their consequences actually are. Lastly, this sort of product saves people's lives far more than the few car crashes that are going to happen anyway because people want to get distracted on phones or other things, and actually will save individuals' lives. In 2017, the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine noted that across over 20,000, or across 20 different studies, that there was conclusive evidence for the benefit of cannabinoids for solving things like chronic pain, chemonausea, multiple sclerosis symptoms, and in effect, even though they have never been linked to any single direct death through their usage, they have instead actually saved lives through about 12,000 different cases across the United States. These are actual benefits that you get with legalization and not something that is already going to be happening with public safety or something that is extremely small with corporatization. Thank you.
Ready? Okay, great. Let's start that time. Now, can you name any programs that are doing this sort of education in states that have legalized?
Yeah, the Medical Marijuana Project.
Okay, what do they do?
They tell people what medical marijuana is and ensure that patients with things of PTSD are able to get access to programs.
Can you remind me your definition of recreational?
Yes, recreational, simply done for enjoyment.
Got it.
So what is the difference between recreational and medical?
Okay, so none of this, I think, really matters for this debate. The argument that I'm getting at is that nonprofits only want to act when they see that there is that it is not illegal to do so. That is legalization.
That wasn't my question. So you brought up some information about medical marijuana. How does that qualify as recreational marijuana under your own definition?
There's no recreational marijuana information right now because weed is not recreational, so I can't give you that information.
Also, technically under our definition, I would define living a life with less pain as enjoyment. So I would say that falls under the definition of recreational.
Sure. I guess my next question would be, you talk about how training and people can provide educational materials. How can you not already research marijuana even in a state where it's illegal?
So the difference is in the stigma attached that we associate with it. This is the same argument I made about sex education. There's a difference between saying you can't do it ever and there's no use of marijuana that is going to be safe or legal, and having some amount of acceptance. Not everyone is going to do weed if we legalize it. Like, the difference is, though, is that in a world in which it is legalized, instead people are going to understand it because there are now institutions at play that can make that happen.
So why is there a difference between legalization and decriminalization if you're just talking about a stigma that only exists when people get incarcerated?
So decriminalization means that there are still criminal penalties. They might not be enforced. Okay, well, at the very least, then you're probably still doing the affirmative. I don't think you've articulated what is different.
My timer just fell. Let me pick that back up. Cool. With that being said, Freddie ready?
Ready, Freddie?
Cool. Y'all ready? Yeah. Cool. Then with that being said, I'll begin on my first word, starting now. Just another quick thank you to everyone for being in this room. But with that being said, for the speech, I'll go into exactly what our opponents have stated, and then articulate why you could feel very comfortable voting negation. First, on their case, contention 1 of economic growth. They talk about how this will help the economy. The problem is that it's for the rich. And they state that, well, if it's for the rich, at least it's some benefit. It is not benefiting anyone in this room. And when the judge is the audience in this round, it's pretty clear which side you should feel comfortable voting off of. Because it's not helping us, it's helping the 1%. But more than that, they state that there is a cannabis tax revenue. The problem is that this directly links to our contention 2, telling you how only large corporations will be able to pay this tax, meaning that small farmers will get crushed, meaning that our contention 2 still remains very strong and you should vote off of that. Then, they state that first mover states are really important because people won't want to go to states that don't have it legalized. That is non-unique because people are always going to choose to vacation in Texas over Arkansas. There's no change in what they're doing. Nobody's going to Arkansas to spend the summer. People will go to Texas because there's actually stuff to do here. There's nothing different in their world from what's already existing. But more than just that, they state that we are actually boosting agricultural work. The problem is that the boosting of agricultural work is actually going to be destroying our environment, which also was completely conceded from them in the last speech, which means that when we move to their second contention, it's game over. Because they state that racial injustice is a problem when incarcerating people due to marijuana. The problem is that that is solved by our counterplan, and they never articulate to you how it isn't. The only thing Tyler states is we haven't told you what is different about decriminalization. So let me make this really clear. The difference is that in legalization, corporations now know that they can legally produce and sell marijuana. So they will move into the state, create factory farming, and then destroy all of the local vendors around the state. What this means is that this is worse for our environment, our economy, and all of us in this room. But more than just that, let's get into exactly the new argument that they just made, which is that black market deaths. The problem is that that would have been a great argument if I didn't prepare for it. Because on that argument, the thing is that in offsetting costs, regulation, enforcement, public health, all cost a lot of money. And we can turn this because corporatization pushes individuals to the black market due to the high price of marijuana. So if they are addicted to a drug, if it becomes more expensive, they will then be pushed to buy off of the black market because it's cheaper. Meaning that if Tyler wants people to not buy off of the black market, then he should also stand on the side of the negation. Because we are the only side that is actually wanting to push people away from it. Because if people want to safely do medicinal marijuana, they can already do that. And also, in the last speech, they stated that people won't do research due to the stigma. But Dr. Lane made a great point at the start of this by talking about how Donald Trump last night made medical marijuana now be able to be researched more, meaning that all of that impact is solved in the status quo on the negation side. There's nothing to vote for the affirmative for. So let's really clearly articulate why we win. So, First contention, he calls it a bad argument, and that a lot of things cause car crashes. Okay, let's not make another option for them to cause car crashes. He states that we can provide educational materials so people won't smoke and drive. I think that you shouldn't have to take a course on that to know that you shouldn't do it. There's nothing being changed in the affirmative world, but on contention 2, he states that only 0.1% is currently used. That's because it's illegal. That's their world, not ours. Good for Cross.
So let's start on the counterplan plan thing. What is the difference between decriminalization and legalization?
Yeah, so legalization is making it completely legal. Decriminalization means that you can still, like, if someone sees that you have weed on you, you're not going to get arrested. It's just the cops can choose to either let you off and be like, okay, cool, you have it, or they can just take it from you.
So then people will just drive with it wherever and farmers will just use it, right?
No, so under decriminalization, similar to how it's not illegal to possess alcohol, but it is still illegal to drive drunk. You can still commit a crime while impaired by marijuana, but you cannot go to jail for simply possessing it. This deals with the disproportionate enforcement and incarceration issues that y'all brought up in your second contention.
Wait, where did we say that it's legal to crash your car, right? Doesn't
That's not what I was saying.
recreationalization, but even in a recreational world, that still applies, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
So you can still commit crimes while impaired by marijuana, and that is something that you could face criminal charges for. But if you were simply possessing marijuana or partaking in it safely in your own home in a way that's not causing any kind of safety risk, you cannot go to jail for simply possessing this substance.
Gotcha.
Is there a certain limit to the amount of things that can cause crashes before we should start outlawing everything that can cause a crash?
I think our source has articulated very good, and it's not a bad argument, that states that 40% of drivers in fatal car crashes were impaired with marijuana. If we have told you in this round that there is something that causes 40% of fatal car crashes, that's something pretty big, and in terms of net benefits, that's 15,000 lives that would have been saved.
Okay, follow up. 100% of car crashes are caused by cars. Should we ban cars?
No.
Right.
Shouldn't.
But like in this world, we can understand though that like cars have a economic benefit and help us all, right? So that we should still have them. Yes?
You don't get addicted to cars.
3 minutes? Okay. Ready? Okay, I'm gonna start that time. Now, this is my last time speaking at my last ever debate, so I want to once again thank everybody so much for being in this room, Jack for being an amazing debate partner, and UT Dallas for coming all the way out here. I'm going to be extending our case and responding to some of the refutation that they've had against us, beginning with our first contention of public health and public safety. I forgot my case. Public safety. So, we talked a lot on this car crash issue, and that's because the affirmation has collapsed our entire contention of numerous public safety harms down to simply this car crash issue, in which they try to minimize the impact that this is having on human lives. They say it's minimal, but that number that I gave you in my first speech of 15,738 preventable deaths in 2024 alone is nothing to be taken lightly. Even if you were to ignore this car crash issue, they have not responded at any point to the information that we bring about how we are seeing increased cannabis-related health incidents in youths, about how we are seeing a potency race if we legalize, how this marijuana is going to become more dangerous. They have no response to this, which means the point stands. Under our second contention, where we are talking about corporatization, they call this a super minute issue because there's not much THC growing in Texas. Well, that's because it's not legal here, like Jack pointed out. That would be like saying only 0.00001% of trailers are used as meth labs. Well, gosh, I wonder why that would be. And so this point completely falls flat. If we were to legalize, we are going to see more production of weed because there's going to be a higher demand for weed, as we bring up in our Columbia University source, and somebody is going to have to be growing it. Like we point out, these large corporations, these factory farms, these company farms are the ones who are able to deal with the taxes, who are able to deal with the startup costs, and so it is not going to be helping local farmers. Now, on our third contention of the counter plan, they simply say that we are not reducing stigma under the counter plan, but this is not true. Like Jack pointed out, the stigma that we see about marijuana comes from the fact that people are incarcerated for marijuana. There's a stigma around incarceration. The stigma is not typically around the marijuana itself. And if we are decriminalizing, we are not seeing incarceration under the counter plan, meaning we are reducing stigma. Also, there are ways for people to receive education and receive help if they are struggling with cannabis use disorder in the status quo and under the counter plan. Rehab programs exist for all addictive substances. People can access this already, and like Jack pointed out, you can access educational materials already in the status quo and under the counter plan. And when we ask this, they get a little bit wishy-washy about the information. We keep coming back down to this issue where they bring up sources about how, well, it's working so well in states that have legalized already, but then when we say, well, why are your sources all medical? Why are your sources all irrelevant to the case? They say, well, it's because there's not sources about recreational marijuana yet. And I think that we should point this out, that a lot of their refutation to our sources and their response to our attacks on theirs is simply saying, well, the research isn't out yet. Well, then how are you citing the research? For all of these reasons and more, we negate.
Quickly, I'd like to once again thank my opponents for inviting us out today. It's been a great debate. I'd like to thank Tyler for coming with me. He's been a great debate partner. And of course, thank you to Dr. John Gooch for driving us all this way. And thank you all for coming to watch. That being said, I do want to start by talking about the fact that of decriminalization and how they're claiming that it's going to lower demand for weed. This is simply a falsity. Decriminalization would actually create a demand for weed much in the same way that legalization would, because there's no consequences for the possession of weed aside from having their stuff taken away, which, I don't know if you know this, but if something of mine got taken away, you know what I'm going to go looking for? More of whatever that thing was. Or in this case, people are going to be out on the markets looking for more weed after it gets taken from them. Meaning that this is going to lead to actually an increased demand in comparison to legalization, where these individuals could simply walk around and have their weed as they so please. Furthermore, we can move on to the argument that they make about public safety. Once again, many different things cause car crashes, and currently the negation is attempting to establish the notion that there's a hard stop quantity to the amount of things that can be threatening to human life behind the wheel. So essentially, they're saying that marijuana was too late to the game, and now suddenly we can't legalize it as a result of that. This is simply untrue. Once again, beer and all sorts of alcohol, as well as cigarettes and cars themselves, are direct causes of car crashes that directly outnumber the 40% that they simply state. This meaning that by saying that the 40% outweighs cars in and of themselves, which are involved in 100% of fatal car crashes, they are completely ignoring the fact of the base issue at hand here, which is the fact that, once again, by putting a hard stop on the amount of things that can lead to a car crash, you are essentially just making it to where individuals cannot have any personal autonomy of any sort. Furthermore, we're going to move on to the black market death point that we make. Again, this is 7,000 people dead that results from marijuana that is laced with much harder substances such as fentanyl. This is simply unjust and would be solved, at least in part, by the legalization of marijuana, as this would be a federally regulated legalization, meaning that this would reduce the amount of fentanyl and other illicit substances being put into individuals' marijuana, and as a result, it would reduce the amount of ODs that we see from marijuana consumption, which includes that 7,000 that we listed earlier. Furthermore, the opponents make the statement that economic growth is for the rich. This is immediately countered by our first piece of evidence, as it counters the notion that we're feeding the rich. Tax money to the Texas government, because they would be taxing the sale of this marijuana, means that this is going to feed back either into our public schools or any other state-funded programs. And as a result, it makes it to where that projected $2.4 billion in sales tax would be able to effectively be used to help our schools and other state-funded programs. Furthermore, we can move on to the idea that Arkansas is not a place that you would travel to over Texas. Well, Arkansas doesn't have legalized weed either, guys, so that's why people aren't traveling to Arkansas. Furthermore, they make the claim that the counterplan is different from legalization, however, it simply isn't. An unregulated industry is effectively the same as a legalized industry. Action without consequence is essentially legalization in a vacuum. So, with all of this brought into mind, you should keep in mind that we are voting for a world wherein marijuana is legalized, at the very least, so that we can reduce the amount of deaths that are resulting from overdoses from illegal substances that are found on the streets. All right, 4 minutes on the clock. Ready, Freddie? Ready. Cool. UTD, all good? All right, I'll get on my first word, starting now. One thing that the opponents don't want to tell you is that humans are actually involved in 100% of fatalities. What this means is that all of their sources are just wrong in this round. But actually, let's get into what is being talked about in this round and why you can feel very confident voting negative. On contention 1, they stated that other things cause car crashes. So for the love of the game, we just give up and just let people continue to die? No, our answer is that if 40% of fatal car crashes are caused by people being inebriated with marijuana, then that's something that we should stop. They asked us for the hard stop quantity. We would tell you is that 15,000 people a year should not die due to marijuana behind the wheel. They state that we will educate people. The problem is that if education worked, it already would have shown it, but it doesn't. More than just that, they state the black market point is really important. The problem is what's more important was the turn that was completely dropped on that point. When I tell you in the last speech that actually they push more people towards the black market because when prices rise, people who are addicted will then need to buy cheap from the black market. Meaning that if they actually want to push people away from buying illegally, they will stand with us on the side of the negation. Now, contention 2, they state that tax money will feed back to us. Trust me, it'll trickle down. That's just not how it works. In actuality, what will happen is all of this tax revenue that is being generated will go towards government programs that don't help us. But more than just that, it will be contributed back and back and back into the same corporations. They also don't address any of the actual claims that we're making in this point, telling you how these small farmers who are crucial to our economy will be shut out. Meaning that once again, for the environment and also for the economy, they should stand with us on the side of the negation. Then, their final thing that they addressed was talking about how we don't know the difference between decriminalization and legalization. So let me make this clear one final time and why you should vote, although they're very articulate speakers, on why you should feel very comfortable. It's because legalization allows these corporations to move into Texas, not Arkansas, to buy up land, to produce weed, and then they push all of our small farmers out of the state. If we are pro the people in this room, if we're pro environment, economy, all that is good, then we're voting for the negative. And it's really clear, because potency also goes dropped. And what that means is that in terms of what the affirmative does, not only are more people now doing this dangerous drug, but it will also be a far more dangerous drug, because people want to buy the good stuff. So they're going to buy the more powerful, more potent, and more lethal drug. Meaning that for our safety, on net benefits, which goes dropped by my opponents in the last speech, it's a really clear ballot. And since my timer turned off, I'll go to Freddie and tell you exactly why in these last 50 seconds you should feel comfortable voting negative.
First is on impact weighing. They spend a lot of their time talking about tax and money. What we have articulated to you in this round is that more than money, what's important is the human lives involved. We're the only side that's given you actual numbers on how many people we're saving, and that's 15,000 a year. But more than just that, you're voting for us on net benefits, because we reduce the stigma, which they also conceded, we prevent unnecessary deaths, and we protect local farmers and landowners. This debate has been a lot of fun, and thankfully we're not in Arkansas. But more than just that, we have proven to you in this round how if you actually want to stand for the people, not just in this room, but in the entire state of Texas, you will vote for North Texas.
Don't worry. 100% of people in this room that are cool will vote for the affirmative. 2 reasons. First, let's start on the economy. This one is probably less important, but you can still feel comfortable voting for the affirmative here. They told you that tax money does not trickle down and that small farmers will be harmed. Yet, there's a couple issues that I told you. First off, we have no idea how many small farmers are going to be hurt because small farmers, spoilers, probably aren't growing weed right now because it's not legal to do so. So no one's losing their jobs in the state of Texas from being a weed farmer if you criminalize, decriminalize, or legalize. It doesn't matter. Nothing changes in this world. The difference is that they say that corporations are going to eat up local farms. And this won't happen in the decriminalized world because they say that legalization allows companies to move into Texas and buy up land. The difference between whether or not something is decriminalized or legalized makes no sense on a different world here. If companies have no recoil to buying up land in Texas, they're going to do so because there's no criminal penalty. It's decriminalized. This happens in both worlds then. They've not really articulated what exactly the difference between having decriminalization or legalization is. The only difference is that the stigma is probably reduced to some amount. Even if you think that only people are stigmatized if they go to jail, there's still going to be some amount of you that believe that if weed is still a crime that could still be recorded at any moment, even if it isn't prosecuted against you, that is still amount of stigma that's going to take people away. So econ probably goes wash. But let's go to the lives point because this is really what matters. Their best argument here is to tell you that people have died from car crashes because they use weed. That does not change in either of these worlds. In a world that you vote for the negative, people will still die from car crashes that smoke weed because causing a car crash is illegal in both worlds. This does not change what substantively happens. The only difference they say is potency changes because individuals that are in a legalized market are somehow incentivized to have a difference in, what sort of they're incentivized to produce. But the market exists in either of these worlds. The difference is the black market. If people have no options, the only choice they have is the black market where they will die because their marijuana is laced with certain things or there's gang violence involved in it. The difference, though, is in a world of legalization, there's at the very least 2 options. Either, yes, maybe you go to the black market, or you go to a place that has gone through federal regulations and that definitely doesn't have it laced with bad products. That's a better world for you no matter what you think about whether or not weed causes car crashes. The difference between the counter plan and the plan is probably not that good. In that world, even if you're not sure about the decision, you should still vote for the affirmative because it allows people to have less stigma, which the only thing having stigma coming out of this round is Arkansas.
From Arkansas?